My name is Ethan Harper. I was 16, living in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Lindenwood. Our streets were clean lined with trimmed trees and manicured lawns, and almost nobody walked outside after dark. I had a girlfriend named Lila, who lived just 2 blocks away. Most nights I would walk to her house, enjoying the calm of the streetlights and the soft rustle of the leaves. One Thursday night, during summer break when I had nothing to do, I started my usual walk over to Lila's house. The night was late, the streets almost deserted. A light breeze whispered through the trees, and for a moment the world felt peaceful. But then I heard something. It was faint at first, just the sound of a bush shaking. I glanced over my shoulder, but saw nothing, just shadows stretching along the sidewalks. My heart picked up speed, but I tried to brush it off. I kept walking. A few steps later, a twig snapped sharply behind me. This time I stopped and turned fully. Nothing. Empty street. The neat rows of bushes separating the sidewalk from each property swayed gently in the wind, but no one was there. My pulse was racing. I quickened my pace. As I neared Lila's house, I heard footsteps. Light, fast, deliberate, right behind me. I spun around. Nothing. No one. Only the faint glow of her window in the distance. I called her, and she picked up immediately. I tried to explain the fear curling in my chest, my voice shaking. I stepped onto her property and noticed her staring out the window. She waved, and I waved back. Then she asked, "Who's that guy behind you?" I turned and froze. A man, fully grown, crouched low about 10 feet behind me. I screamed and ran for the door, pounding on it. He grabbed me, tried to put me in some sort of headlock. Panic surged through my body. By some miracle, he let go and bolted. Lila's mom opened the door eyes wide and pulled me inside. She called the police while holding me tightly. That night, I stayed at Lila's, still trembling, unable to calm my racing heart. I thought that was the worst it could get. I was wrong. The next night, a storm hit our town. Lightning flashed. Thunder rolled. Rain pelted against the windows. I was in my room watching TV, feeling unusually calm despite the chaos outside. But then, there was a monstrous bang on my window. I jumped heart in my throat. A figure was out there, silhouetted by the storm, face obscured by rain. He pounded at the window, screaming for help. I cracked the window slightly, and he yelled, "I'm hurt. Please, help me." The rain was deafening. I shouted for him to go around to the front, then bolted to tell my dad. He was about to open the front door, but something told me not to. The phone rang. It was our neighbor. My dad picked up, and I heard a single, panicked word, "No." He hung up and warned us to stay away from the door. Looking through the window, he saw the man crouched on our porch, holding a sharp tool. My dad yelled for him to leave before the police arrived. Eventually, the man disappeared. Later, the cops found him wandering the streets, dangerous and unpredictable. Even as a kid, I noticed that fear could come in strange ways. When I was 6, I was watching cartoons in the living room when I thought I heard my mom calling my name from the basement. I went down to check. Darkness swallowed the stairs. I called again. Silence. When I peeked into the basement, it was empty, but the voice came again. I ran upstairs, crying. My mom came rushing down, swearing she hadn't called me. Something unseen had been mimicking her voice. Years later, visiting my grandfather Henry on his farm, I heard another story that chilled me. He had a Boston Terrier named Sherry. Every evening, he would take her for a walk along a dirt path near the woods. One evening, a man with a hood passed him. Sherry barked, tugged. My grandfather tried to keep walking, but the man circled back, hiding behind trees, following them. Suddenly, the man lunged, covering my grandfather's mouth and nose. Sherry bit and barked, giving him just enough time to grab his pepper spray. He sprayed until the man screamed and ran. My grandfather lived, but the memory of that night haunted him, and now it haunted me. Even in California, where I grew up, danger was always nearby. At 12, my best friend Dylan and I biked around our neighborhood and decided to check an abandoned house. From the front, it seemed empty for years. But someone or something was in the window. At first, we thought it was a decoration. When we snuck inside, we discovered the truth. A human head resting on the windowsill, blood seeping from beneath it. We ran, terrified. That was the moment I learned that some horrors aren't just in stories, they exist in the world. Over time, I realized fear wasn't only about people. It could be a sound in the dark, a shadow that moved wrong, or a momentary glimpse of someone watching. Once, a man came to my mom's door in our rural town pretending to sell products. When I learned later, he was part of a child exploitation ring on the deep web. I had narrowly escaped. All of these memories built a pattern danger always lurks. It can hide behind normality in suburban streets, in quiet homes in stormy nights. And often, the scariest part isn't the attacker. It's the knowledge that someone or something might always be watching just beyond your sight. I thought leaving those memories behind would make me feel safe. But fear has a way of returning quietly in shadows and whispers. Every creaking floorboard, every rustle of leaves, every figure in the dark reminds me safety is temporary and terror can return at any moment. After years of living with these memories, I thought I had grown used to fear. I thought I could rationalize it, push it away. But some nights, it comes back stronger, sharper when you least expect it. One of those nights happened when I was 14, babysitting a 6-year-old boy named Cody. His parents had left me with a few simple instructions. Order pizza, keep him out of his room, and nothing else. Except for a comment that lingered in my mind, Cody acted differently than most kids. He would talk to himself, or, as they said, his imaginary friend, especially while playing. It was pouring outside. Rain slammed against the windows. The room smelled faintly of damp wood. Cody was on the living room floor, his toys scattered around him. "Agnes," he said, his voice soft, almost urgent. He was talking to someone invisible, or at least I thought so. One of his toys, a small mechanical cube with a pull crank, suddenly activated on its own. I froze. It required effort to turn the crank, yet it moved. "Who did that?" I asked. Agnes Cody replied without hesitation. A shiver ran down my spine. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the toy malfunctioned. Maybe it was the wind. But the unease settled deep in my chest. I picked up the toy and turned it off, hoping it would end there. Later, while waiting for his parents, I went to the bathroom. There was a knock at the door. "Cody," I called. No answer. I checked the hallway. Still nothing. Then one of the doors at the far end of the hall began to creak open slowly, deliberately. My heart jumped. I killed the lights and crept toward it. Cody was sitting on the bed, eyes wide, staring at me. Who opened the door? I asked. Agnes, he whispered. That was the moment I realized whatever was in this house, whatever had been moving the toys, was not imaginary. I spent the rest of my shift glued to Cody, too terrified to leave him too disturbed to make sense of what I had seen. When his parents returned, I said nothing. Weeks later, when they asked me to babysit again, I declined. Some experiences are too strange, too dangerous to relive. Years later, I found myself in another precarious situation. I've always been an extreme sports enthusiast. Mountain climbing, parasailing, scuba diving. But skiing was my true passion. I'd travel upstate to ski at least 10 times a season. One trip, my friend Hugh and I decided to try backcountry skiing, far from patrolled areas, isolated in the woods. After a long drive and off-roading, we set up camp at the bottom of a hill. I carried our gear through the underbrush, every step heavy and exhausting. Night fell quickly, and we had barely unpacked when we went to scout the slopes. At one point, I lost sight of Hugh while skiing down a large hill. Assuming he would meet me at the bottom, I walked slowly with my skis checking the walkie-talkie. Static answered me. Someone was trying to communicate, but I couldn't make out the message. Then I ran into another skier, a man friendly sounding, wearing an orange backpack with skis strapped to it. He asked where the best hills were, if we were camping nearby, and I pointed him to our camp. Something about him didn't feel right, but I pushed the thought aside. I led him partway to the campsite. The walkie-talkie buzzed again with static, but I ignored it. We finally reached the clearing where I had set up our tent. I turned to look at him and noticed there was no wife with him, and his voice, though friendly, carried a strange, chilling tone. Before I could react, he stepped closer, fast. Instinct screamed at me. I dived into the tent, fumbling for my flare gun. The man grabbed my leg, and a burning, electric shock-like pain ripped through me. I screamed. With trembling hands, I managed to fire the flare gun. The man recoiled, hands raised. I ordered him to stand still, demanding to know where Hugh was. He spat out a location near the bottom of the hill, then ran off into the night. I sat in the snow leg, throbbing, waiting for the reassuring sound of the rescue helicopter. Finally, it appeared. Hugh had been injured, unconscious, robbed, and left in the middle of the slope. We survived. We healed. But the terror lingered in me long after the hospital stay. Even in college, the sense of being watched never left. I lived in a small college town within walking distance of bars and downtown. One late night, I stepped outside to smoke and saw a girl from the apartment next door returning home alone. She barely got inside before a man knocked on her door. It was 2:30 a.m. I stayed outside observing. He lingered unnervingly, touching her hair, inching closer. I slammed my textbook on the stairs to make my presence known. He vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. Days later, police confirmed he was a serial predator targeting women alone after bars. That night, I realized danger didn't just lurk in the shadows. It often arrived in plain sight. I learned this lesson again with Craigslist. I went to pick up a ping pong table, only to discover the seller's basement was filled with Polaroid photos of bound girls. My heart froze. The smell of damp and dust, the silence, the stillness of the house, it all screamed danger. I barely managed to escape. Later, authorities confirmed he was part of a child exploitation ring on the deep web. Through all of this, I began to understand something crucial. Terror doesn't always announce itself. It hides in small details, sounds, shadows, misaligned movements, voices that mimic those you trust. The world is full of people who seem normal, but underneath some harbor unimaginable darkness. And yet the scariest moments are not always about surviving. They are about knowing that at any moment someone could be watching, following, or lying in wait. That knowledge clings to you, whispering in the quiet hours, reminding you that fear is never truly gone. Even after all those terrifying experiences, I still found myself drawn into situations that tested every ounce of my courage. One incident stands out vividly. It happened during my college years in a small apartment complex just a short walk from downtown. I stepped out on the porch late one night, smoking, studying, half lost in my textbook. The streets were empty, the night unusually quiet. A girl I had never met, living one floor below, returned from downtown alone. I noticed immediately that she had been drinking, her movements unsteady, her steps hesitant. She barely closed the door behind her when a man appeared seemingly out of nowhere, knocking aggressively. It was 2:30 a.m. I watched from the porch, heart pounding. He introduced himself casually, asking questions that made little sense at that hour. But then, his behavior changed, subtle at first, then more invasive. He reached up to touch her hair, leaned closer and closer. I slammed my textbook on the stairs, trying to make my presence obvious. The man froze for a moment, then vanished. Later, the police confirmed he was a serial predator targeting young women alone, preying on their trust. That night reinforced a terrifying truth: danger is unpredictable, often silent, often closer than you think. Then there was the Craigslist incident. I went to pick up a ping pong table, thinking it was a mundane errand. When I entered the seller's basement, I found something far beyond comprehension. Polaroid photographs of girls bound to chairs, faces hidden or partially revealed, stacked neatly beside folders labeled A to Z. The smell of damp and dust mixed with something darker, a metallic tang in the air that made me gag. I snapped pictures with my phone, but there was no service. My escape was frantic. I tried the door, found it locked, and heard the man's deep, raspy voice, apologizing from the other side. Heart racing, I manipulated the keyhole with the screwdriver I had grabbed from his desk, barely unlocking it. I ran, never looked back, and delivered the evidence to the police. Days later, I learned he was part of a child exploitation ring on the deep web. I will never forget the weight of knowing I had been so close to unimaginable horror. Even seemingly innocent jobs like babysitting could turn sinister. Years before, watching Cody, the 6-year-old, I had glimpsed something supernatural, or something my mind couldn't explain. Toys moving on their own voices, mimicking someone familiar, doors creaking in empty rooms. When I tried to confront it, I realized the presence was intelligent, aware of me. That night, the sensation of being watched didn't fade. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't relax. And when his parents asked me to babysit again weeks later, I declined. Some doors once opened should remain closed. Through all of these events, a pattern emerged. Terror is persistent. It waits in the background in subtle shifts, in moments when you think you are safe. I have learned to notice the small signs, a shadow moving where it shouldn't, the faint sound of a whisper behind a door, the way someone or something watches you without being seen. I've faced life-threatening encounters, survived strangers with malicious intent, and even confronted the supernatural in my youth. Yet the scariest moments are not always physical. They are psychological. It's the knowledge that danger exists everywhere, sometimes in plain sight, sometimes in the dark spaces just beyond your perception. And it leaves a lasting imprint, a constant whisper at the edges of your consciousness, reminding you that safety is fleeting. Now, when I walk alone at night, I am hyper-aware. Every bush shaking, every creak of a porch, every shadow that flickers unnaturally sends my mind racing. And I know deep down that the terror isn't over. It never is. It waits patient, knowing that one night, one moment, I might let my guard down. And when that happens, it will strike again, quiet, precise in the darkness. I thought I had survived it all. I thought leaving those streets, that farm, that neighborhood, that basement behind me would be enough. But some nights, when the wind howls and the shadows stretch longer than they should, I hear it again, the faint sound of movement behind me. Footsteps light, but deliberate, a whisper that mimics a familiar voice. And I remember with a shiver that runs from my scalp to my toes that fear never truly leaves. It waits, always. And that is what terrifies me most.